Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Growth Mindset Show. My name is Mahesh Chand. I'm founder of CSharpCorner and host of this weekly Growth Mindset Show. If you are joining us first time, this show is every Friday, 12 noon Eastern. During last couple of months, during summertime, we have been on and off. But starting now and next month, this should be more regular every Friday, 12 noon. Eastern Time. If you're joining us from Asia, India, I'm sure it's evening there. Um, Good evening and welcome to the show. Ryan, welcome to the show. Abhishek, as you all know, if you're joining us back, you already know. Deepak, welcome back to the show. I see some familiar faces. Keshav is joining us from today. Welcome, Keshav. So if you already know that this show is all about you. We talk about different topics as a growth mindset. Our focus is on growth, your growth, right? How do we grow from this level to the next level, right? We're always trying to grow as a human being. And this is what we talk in this show, not just technical, but non-technical in different topics. Um, you can ask any questions in the show. We don't restrict any kind of questions. Try to post as many questions you like. Questions for me, questions for guests, anything about community, jobs, career, weather, whatever you want to talk about. We are open to in this show. This show is pretty open. We talk about, general topics, what's going on out there in the world. Everything is here open. So as I said, welcome to the show. Let's have some fun today. Today, as you probably saw, we are on social media. You probably saw that today's focus is cloud. Cloud is one of the fastest growing technologies of today. Every company is hiring cloud developers, cloud advocates, cloud architects. So today we have a special guest, Vishwas Lele. He is a good friend, the Microsoft Regional Director for Microsoft MVP, and he's a CTO of a company, which we will talk in a minute. So if you have any questions about cloud, future of cloud, bring your questions. Make sure you have your questions ready for our guests. And you can post all the questions. As I said, this show is all about you. If you think that any of your friends, coworkers, anybody who can benefit from this show, let them know. Please do share this on your social media, like, comments, so more people can benefit from it. I see a bunch of familiar faces here. I see welcome Ryan, Anjali, Suchita, Atul Gupta, Shivangi Sharma. Welcome to the show. Deepak, looks like we have good people joining us from different places. Looks like a lot of people joining us from India. I see a couple of people join us from the US as well. Chairman, good morning. So good evening there if you're joining us from India. Again, guys, this show is all about you, your future. We are going to talk about cloud and a bunch of other things. Before we bring our guest, I hope that COVID situation is getting better wherever you are. I know COVID is still here, slowly growing in the US. Here, cases are they're kind of growing. A lot of people are, even though almost half of the population is vaccinated here in the US, but still there's new variants coming up. So wherever you are, hopefully you are safe. Hopefully things are getting better for you. If you are not vaccinated, please go get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. And now they're even saying that, still have to wear a mask. So please take precautions. We don't know about this. It's still unknown. So many things are unknown. So hopefully you and your family and friends are safe. Um, so today what we are going to talk about is we are going to talk about some things mostly around cloud technologies. And after that, we will also talk about career, jobs. Um, if you're trying to switch your job, you're looking for a new career path, anything around that. So if you have any of those questions you want to post in the comments, please feel free to post comments. We will take some of those questions in later in this show, and also second half is almost open to this all the questions. I see more people join. Aman, Chaman, Tarun, Deepak, Ashish, welcome to the show. If you also guys have some, when we are talking about certain topics, if you have any feedback and any experience, feel free to post your comment there as well. We try to, make it like a very conversational. So, Mega, welcome to the show. With that said, let's bring our guest today. Before actually I bring our guest, there's one more thing I want to cover is that if you all of you guys, if you're familiar with that, C Sharp Corner partner with several other event and conference companies. We have partner and we are doing this one of the largest conference, Azure Summit. It's all focused on Azure. And I don't know if you saw that, but in the beginning we started that as a 2 day conference, then started a 3 day conference, then it was 5 days, it was 7 days. Now it is 10 days conference. 10 days of non-stop learning as you're learning. It's because there's so many people are signing up, so many speakers are asking us to participate in that. I believe we have close to 150, if not more. We have 150, speakers speaking for 10 days, and then we have already more than 20,000 registrations already for the conference. And keep in mind, it's still a long way to go. It's in September. It's in September, starting September 13th. So we still have a month and a half to go. We are expecting more than 50,000 people are going to join this conference. Each day it's a 10 days, so we have to figure it out. Each day there's going to be a different keynote on different topics, but it's everything about Azure. So if you are working or you want to learn about Microsoft Azure, or you're trying to get certified, or you have questions and you want to learn new topics, check out the agenda. Follow Azure Summit. It's on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's on YouTube, everywhere. So go for Azure Summit 2021. Also, azuresummit.live. I believe that's the URL. Simon just put in there, azuresummit.live. Check it out. So that's something I'm very excited about next month. We also recently launched a challenge on C Sharp Corner. So challenge is a new feature we announced where you can take a challenge and figure out, see how good you are in a specific technology. For example, you can take a C Sharp challenge, you can take Azure challenge, you can take blockchain challenge, and see how you fare out there. And if you think you didn't pass the challenge, if you pass the challenge, you're going to get certificate, by the way, and then you can share that certificate on your social media and also on your profile. But if you don't pass, there's also help available. Say if you go and read these documents and tutorials, you can learn more about that topic. So check it out. The challenge, which is still in beta. Have not fully launched it yet. If you have any feedback, just let us know. Um, and again, welcome to the show. Looks like more people joining in. This is a growth mindset every Friday, 12 noon Eastern time. Here we talk about and how to build your growth mindset. And we bring different guests each week. There's different guests. We talk about different topics. Today's topic is cloud, future of cloud, and anything about your career and jobs. All right, so let's bring in our guest, Vishwas Lele. Hey, Vishwas, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mahesh. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, this Friday. I know everybody's busy. I'm sure you are very busy with the whole cloud and, with your company. Where are you joining us? You want to tell our audience about where you're joining us and how the situation has changed during this pandemic from, post-pandemic, I mean, previous pandemic, how things are going with you?
Yeah, we are not quite in post-pandemic, unfortunately, but
Yes.
I am based in Northern Virginia, which is about 20 miles west of Washington, D.C. So that's where I'm based in. And Mahesh, once again, thank you for inviting me. Your second question was, how have things changed in the pandemic? Did I parse that question correctly?
Yeah, for you from not only just professionally, from work-wise and also
Or what?
family-wise. I
Yes,
understand
yes,
that.
yes. No, no, I appreciate the question. So, Mahesh, we have been fortunate as technologists, and many of the people who are attending are probably in the same boat. As technologists, we have been really fortunate. A, we are quite used to working remotely. So the so this idea that you had to work over the last 18 months or so remotely, we're quite used to that, and our nature of work is conducive to that. So we are fortunate, and I have to say that many other professions are not as fortunate, and people had to be in the front lines of the pandemic. And many of the audience members are joining from India. My own family in India went through a difficult time all the month of June. They're doing okay now, but there was, including close family members and friends. So, uh, you know, just ourselves, just myself in this area, we did okay, but not so much the other family members. In terms of pandemic affecting the work, Mahesh, uh, since we are primarily focused on the cloud, and we have been for the last several years, pandemic saw an increase in investment in the cloud. There's no surprises there. People wanted to make their infrastructure more resilient. People wanted to work remotely. People wanted to scale up. People wanted to scale up their collaboration pieces or software. All of that resulted in an increased workload on us and our employees, which I suppose is a good problem to have. But being a cloud first company, we saw a lot of demand on our times since the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay, that's great. So everybody who's watching us, this was joining us from Virginia. It's 2 hours from me, I would say. 2 hours where I live outside of Philadelphia. Yes, but I agree with you. Things have changed. I mean, from like personal front, I have friends and families. They've been affected, especially in India, from this whole COVID situation. But from work wise, I agree with you. We are used to working remotely even before pandemic. So for me also and us, it's like there's actually more work than less work, right? And we've been fortunate in that industry at SD. So everybody who's watching this, as Vishwas said, that cloud is growing. There's like I think during pandemic, need of cloud has grown even much faster than it was supposed to. And I think somebody in Microsoft keynote or somehow I heard that we have moved even in Zoom or something. They said we have moved actually 5 years ahead in last 1 year because of the pandemic in the cloud and tech space. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, in fact, I'll give you my own example. One of our customers who've been, a pretty advanced user of Azure, uh, they provisioned compute resources in the first 30 days of the lockdown that were greater than all of the compute resources that they had provisioned in the last 5 years. So in first 30
Wow.
days of so as soon as the shutdown happened, they had to go into this mode of enabling their thousands and thousands of remote workers through this capability. Right, these people were all based in the different centers around the country, and overnight they had to come up with an infrastructure where they could dial in and do their work. We provision literally more compute capability than all of the 5 years combined. So there is no doubt that cloud was already uh, even before pandemic. It was pretty clear if you just look at the numbers that Amazon and Azure and Google and other cloud providers have been posting even before 2020. If you look at that, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that public cloud is the future of enterprise IT or any IT for that matter. It was very clear. And companies that had invested in thinking about the cloud were better prepared to handle the pandemic. There's no question. And you can look at a number of papers now, they're talking about how can you make your company more resilient, and all of the investments that people made. Because it's not, you might be able to go to a SaaS service overnight, but you will not be able to go to uh, uh, more enterprise cloud scenarios overnight if you have not been doing the planning for that, right? So the example that I mentioned, that this company did more compute capability provisioning in 30 days than over the last 5 years, what enabled them to do that was they had all of the governance, the brokerage, the automation, uh, maturity baked in into their environment that allowed them to scale up in this manner. If they had been waiting on the sidelines, not having thought about the cloud, not thought about the cloud transformation, and this comes upon you, then it would have been very hard to drive that kind of change that would have allowed thousands of their remote workers to be able to continue to be productive.
Yeah, that's very good point and valid point. And there are some companies now they're rushing, and it's they're challenging, especially if you have the big lot of data and you're trying to migrate that. That can't be done overnight. That's going to take time. And a lot of companies, if they are not cloud savvy staff, and they don't have that. There is a challenge for that.
That, that's
Uh,
that's the sorry. That's
I'll give
absolutely.
you, yeah, yeah. And I'll give you an example, and then you can finish that. Is one of the company, I can say the name. They're one of the large telecom. They're trying to move their 3,000 applications. So they moved already in last 2 years and so, but now their cost is 300 times more than what they were doing before. It's
Mhm.
because they didn't have a staff who understand how to, configure and all that.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So no, no, Mahesh, that's a great example. Many of your listeners probably read a very interesting article that came out about 2 or 3 months ago. It's called the trillion as in T as in Tom, $1 trillion paradox. And if you've not read that article, I encourage you to check it out. Okay. And it is talking about the $1 trillion paradox is talking about the the costs overrun in the public cloud, right? So
Yeah.
cloud is great for innovation. You jump in, you create the resources, there's less friction. But then once you're in there, if you do not have a mature way of provisioning, a mature way of tracking your costs, it can become a big drag. And in fact, that's the premise of that article, that companies, there are a few examples, and I don't want to be uh, I don't want to sound alarmist at all by any means, but there are some companies, especially ISVs, who have been doing a lot of thinking about their cloud spend and saying, maybe we need to rethink how we've architected our applications because this model is not sustainable. So read that article when you get a chance, and maybe we can have a conversation offline about that. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, and what you just said is that's exactly why this company reach out to me is like, can you help us? Because how come we moved to cloud? It's supposed to, we were thinking it'll be less costly. How come it's so costly? What can we do? And then I was looking at like this, where that's all wrong. You can't just go and spin up one VM for every application and just keep it running even though you don't use it. So that was funny. Well, I will talk more on this topic, but let's before I go more deep into the cloud and there's a lot of questions coming in, so everybody, thank you for asking these great questions. Again, your asking question is very important for us because that kind of tells me that at least you are listening. First of all, you're not sleeping, and at least you like our guest, what guest is saying. So thank you for all these great questions. We are going to take your questions in a few minutes, but let me finish first my questions. uh, so before we go into cloud and all, Vishwas, you want to give our audience a little background on your, yeah, like your college, where you come from, and now you are a CTO of a big company. How do you reach to that level? And yeah, then I'll have more questions about related to this.
Yes, yes. So thank you for that question. Actually, my background is pretty simple. You'll know what I mean. Uh, I and I'll try to take your other part of the question, that how did I reach this point, which I don't think we are a very big company or very distinguished role or any of that sort. But let me just tell you what my background is, and then I'll try to answer the second part of the question. So, Mahesh, I started out. Uh, Doing an undergrad engineering from India. My degree, undergrad engineering, was uh, electrical engineering, nothing to do with programming at that time. And I should say one other thing. Even before engineering, uh, I was fortunate enough that one of the neighbors had a computer which was the Sinclair Spectrum. You probably, I'm sure you know this, the ZX81, which came out in 1982. It was a little home computer, right, which could connect to your TV and you could write some programs. And the neighbor was very kind to me that they knew that I was interested in that device. They would let me. Now I look back, Mahesh, that I was sure I was quite bothersome to them to show up in their house every day. They wouldn't let me take the computer away because it was expensive, but I would show up in their house every day, and they were very kind and let me use it. So I had some interest in programming. That was in the high school days, and then I could not get into a computer science program, so I got into electrical engineering. The school I went to did not have a computer science degree. So I ended up doing all my programming in assembly. And I quickly figured out, Mahesh, that I was not very good in the electrical engineering aspects of things. So I focused on more of sort of the microprocessor based programming, the 8085, 8086, all, if you remember all of that. Some of you
Yeah.
may not remember that aspect of it. And then essentially took up my first job was out of Delhi. I know many of your audience members have joined from Delhi. My first job was in Delhi. I started out working for uh, a collaboration between Tata and Unisys Corporation called Tata Unisys. I joined that in 89, and I worked at that company for about 5 years. My main skill areas were uh, doing assembly programming because I was mainly working on a COBOL compiler at that time, which was largely written in assembly. And then that was about 5 years of that. And then in 1994, I joined my current company, uh, which is Applied Information Sciences. And at that time, they were building a product which was a mainframe modernization product back in 94. So I said to myself, these guys are building a mainframe modernization product, and I need to modernize my skills. So I think, there's a good opportunity to work here. So that was 27 years ago. And that's why I said, Mahesh, that my history is pretty simple. I joined one company, and then I switched the job, and I've been here for the 27 years. I joined AIS as an engineer, and have been doing working on various technologies, working as an engineer, a senior engineer, and at some point architect, and that's been my journey, Mahesh.
So, oh, that's great. That's great. You've been in one company for so long. That's awesome. So what was the biggest, like, if you look at back, look, like, what was the biggest, either challenge or you would say you faced during this time, during, you're obviously 27 years, you've seen a lot in your company and our industry. What was the biggest challenge? Either you have to upgrade your company to the next level or upgrade your staff. Any challenges you faced where you feel like, this was the biggest thing, challenge you
Yeah,
had?
yeah. So one of the biggest things, Mahesh, the challenge has, I still consider ourselves. I know this is relative, Mahesh, but I still consider ourselves a small company. We're about 750 people or so, which may not be small by some standards, but is small from somebody else's perspective. The biggest challenge I feel is that as a company of a small to mid size, you have to constantly reinvent yourself because the larger software companies will come and commoditize what you're working on and drive you out of the market, right? So, in some ways, when I look at my 27 years, it on one hand, it seems like it's a long time, but I don't think that it is so long for a couple of reasons. I think of my stay here as broken up into 4 or 5 phases, right? My first phase was building the product. Second phase was sort of more doing .NET came out, so doing some ASP applications. Then we wrote the SharePoint as an enterprise platform wave for a number of years. Then came the cloud, and over the last few years, or I would say last 18 months or 24 months, we've been heavily focused on data and AI. So the biggest challenge is that you have to constantly find a way to reinvent yourself. Otherwise, you're going to get commoditized, and that requires looking out for what is changing, retooling the company, training the people that you work with, all of that. Those are some of the bigger challenges. that I've seen in the last few years. In addition to the challenges that every company faces, which is, how do you hire people? How do you keep them trained? How do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace? All of those challenges are common to everybody. But since your question was, what is the core challenge that I've seen in my years, which is to stay relevant and differentiated over a period of time.
That's great. That's great. And that leads to my next question. But before that, hey, welcome back. Welcome. I mean, we have more people join here. Vishnu, Aditi, Shivangi, Ganesh, SPI, Po, Arjun, Ravi, Shukla. Welcome to the show. This is a growth mindset. So today we are talking with our guest, Vishwas Lele. He's a CTO at AIS and also Microsoft Regional Director. And you're still Microsoft MVP?
I am.
Okay, so you're also Microsoft MVP. How many times now?
Well, I was an MVP in other areas before, but since 2013, I've been an Azure MVP.
Azure MVP. Yep. So we'll talk a little bit about MVP. But back to your what you just said that these small to mid-sized companies they have to compete with large corporations and they have to kind of keep up not only just up to date but pretty much ahead of curve, right? So they can go and tell clients like we can do this faster and better than large corporations, right?
Yep.
So if you have to advise to our audience, and this question I get a lot. So I'm taking this question, old question, that should they be joining a small company, startup, or mid-size or large corporation? What is your
Mhm.
advice and why and to who?
Yeah, my advice, and Mahesh, I don't know if I have a template or a blueprint or do these things and you'll be successful. I don't think I have it, but I really like to think about. Uh, Many of your listeners know about the famous speech that Steve Jobs gave at the Stanford commencement address. If you've not heard that speech, go back and listen to it. So,
Yeah.
what Steve Jobs was saying there was it is really difficult to connect the dots going forward, right? You can't say, I'll do this and I will do this and I'll reach this point X. You can't do that. It's really hard to do that. It's hard for Steve Jobs to do that, leave alone people like us, right? But what Steve Jobs said is it's always possible to connect the dots backwards, right? If you are at a certain point and you see, I did this and this led to this. So what Steve Jobs was saying in that speech, and it was a long speech, and I encourage you to listen to it or read that speech, that you have to go with your gut feeling about what things and what choices and what decisions you make and and knowing that those decisions will collectively take you to the point where you want to reach, right? But what I would say is the small company or large company really doesn't matter that much, right? What matters is what you are doing, what you are putting in your progress, right? So I'll give you a very concrete example, Mahesh, that you might be a developer, and let's take a simple example that everybody can follow. You might be a developer, a web developer on one of the projects somewhere, small company, mid-sized company, large company, doesn't matter, right? And let's say you have a couple of years of experience and you're developing for this company. The important thing is to take some time outside of your core work and think about and reflect on how you can become a better engineer, a better craftsman. So I'll give you an example. So the code that you wrote, maybe in the current sprint, reflect on it, and maybe did you consider all of the chaos scenarios? If this application were to be subjected to this spike in load, did you think about that chaos scenario? And if you did not, maybe you will spend a couple of hours looking at some great courses out there on chaos scenarios. Now you have expanded your knowledge. You did not burn down any scrum hours by doing that. Nobody came and told you that, but you yourself took the time to reflect on what you're doing. You tried to improve your what you did as part of your work. And I guarantee you, nobody will. So let's say you spend a couple of hours thinking about chaos scenarios in your web application over the weekend, like Sunday morning, I'm going to spend a couple of hours on the chaos scenarios. I guarantee you on Monday morning, you will not get any pats on the back from your project manager. None. You will not get it. You should not expect it. But if you keep doing this week over week over week over week, in the long run, you would have created enough value not just for your employer but for yourself, right? You would have widened your horizons from being a developer to someone who thinks more holistically about a problem, and that ultimately is going to bear fruits in the longer run. So that would be my advice, and probably not different from what you've heard from others.
Yeah, so that's a great advice. So you have to, I think, goal is to find the challenging work where you have learning opportunities and also growth, right? There are some people they complain that, oh, I've been working in this project for 3 years and all I do is bug fixing. So that's probably, I mean, it's good as a company you have to do that, but you have to figure out side by side how you are learning new things, right? That's kind of all
Yeah,
right.
and
So now, yeah,
learning. I'm sorry, Mahesh. So I hear that a lot. That hey, I got put in a project where I'm really my learning has stopped, right?
yeah,
And now there are enough opportunities. Once you have a commitment to learning and once you have a dedication to continuous improvement, your current project may not give you an opportunity to do some other work, but there are enough open source projects out there that if you spend 2 or 3 hours a week just contributing to that project, you might make connections, you might learn from it, and in the end you might be able to actually go to your employer and say, I've been doing bug fixes, but here's what I've accomplished outside in terms of my contributions in this open source project. Or maybe you can bring an innovative idea of, I've been seeing too many bugs in this area, and here is a white paper that I wrote, which can then be sent to the source team about how to tackle those kinds of errors. And these are all ways of trying to extract yourself from a situation will not be conducive to learning. So
yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. And then I have one more question before we're going to take a break, 2 minutes break after this question. And then there's a lot of questions coming in here. So we're going to start taking some of these questions as well. And then I have more questions. So it looks like it's going to be a busy session. So one thing I cannot totally actually there's a question here as well. We're going to talk multi cloud. We're going to talk about all the cloud questions, guys, in the second half of this session. So, yep. So, I have a question about this young guys coming, right? Young students coming, and I talk to them sometimes, and I'm speaking at a college, and when I say, hey, why we have a project, why don't you start learning in this project, and it's in C sharp and all that, and out of sudden, to say, I'm not interested in C sharp, I'm more interested in Python. I hear this a lot. What advice do you give to the students and young developers who close mind their opportunity to work on a real project in different language versus they're trying to learn themselves something Python? Or is it the right thing, or they should, or how should they think?
So I think that, and I'm trying to understand your question, Mahesh, here as well. So help me out. So when they
So let
ask,
me add, let me add more to this. So there's
yeah,
a trend going on in India and universities and colleges that every student is learning Python.
mhm.
They feel like the Python is going to take over the world and there's no other jobs anywhere else. So all they learn Python. So they are not even open to work. So, we are trying to hire, say, let's say some interns. Say interns, we found these guys, 4 students, join us, you get a full-time employment right away. You're going to learn C sharp and this and that. They're like, no, we're looking for Python. So to me,
Yeah,
I think if you ask me, it's a bad thing to wait around rather than learning something. It can be any technology. I don't think it matters if you learn Python or C sharp. End of the day, your goal should be problem solving.
that I completely agree with you, Mahesh. So here's my advice on that, right? When you're starting your career, you're not trying to chase the shiny object, right? Python may be the most popular language. That's fine. And Python is great for scenarios, and it will continue to be great for many scenarios. But it may not be so great for other scenarios, right? What you should be as somebody who's trying to look for an opportunity, you should be looking at a computational thinking model. And I know this is a fancy word to use, but what I really mean by that is languages are a mean to a solution, right? C sharp, Python, Go. lang or whatever. These are a means to achieving a solution. We are not becoming developers and programmers just for our fun, that we want to have fun with this, right? Ultimately somebody is paying for our salaries, and that has to be tracked back to some sort of a business value enablement, right? I mean, that's what is paying for our time and things like that, right? So it's not about a certain language. And I'll go back to the fancy term I used, which I hate to use, but it communicates an important point. We are trying to solve the problem that a business has. And in order to solve a problem, what you need to do is exhibit a computational thinking mindset, right? How will you solve that problem, right? Language is just a syntax, but how will you solve the problem? Does it make sense to rewrite this piece of code? What should be the logic? How would you write this code to be more robust? Those are all aspects of computational thinking. Languages are just a means of achieving that. So be open minded about that. You can learn more than one language. You can join a project and say this piece of this code can be best served using Python. Fine, go for it. But if the rest of the team, which may be 20 or 30 people, are using or converging on another language, you have to do what the other teams are doing. So be open minded about it. There are plenty of opportunity to learn new languages.
Well, that's great. Great answer. And we're going to take a 2 minute break and then we'll be back. Looks like we have a lot of questions coming up. I don't think we'll cover this in an hour, but we'll try to cover as many questions, guys. Keep those questions coming. Everybody will be right back.
Here at Mindcracker, we create artificial, virtual, and mixed reality games and apps, voice-enabled skills and apps, and intelligent apps, and integrate AI with IoT products. We offer advisory services for innovations and startups. We provide cloud and code security and performance services. We also offer AI/ML blockchain development, consulting, and training. Just visit www.mindcracker.us to make your dreams into a reality. Hey guys! Can't believe we haven't seen each other since graduation in May. What's going on?
Not much. With the pandemic, I can't really do anything right now.
Me too. I mostly just stay at home, hang out with my dog, and watch the news.
I feel you. Have you guys been able to get jobs yet?
Funny that you ask. Gary and I actually have been working on something together.
Yeah, we came up with an idea for a startup that's an app that will help us stay active since we both have been sitting around so much during this quarantine.
That's genius. I could definitely use something like that. When are you guys launching it?
Well, that's the issue. We don't really know how to build it, so we're kind of stuck.
I know of this company that does startup advising if you guys are interested.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're called Mindcracker, and they'll help you validate your idea and connect you with angel investors and help you build everything from your product MVP to your technical team and even your go-to market planning and execution.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you know how we could get in touch with them?
Yeah, you can just visit their website, mindcracker.us.
That's awesome, May. Thanks. I'm excited to get started on this.
Of course. Good luck, guys, and let's talk soon.
Thanks, May.
All right, we are back here. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Welcome to the show. I see new people join. Welcome to the show, and everybody who's here, welcome back to the show. We are here today with Vishwas talking about cloud. Um, Simon, you can start putting questions after my this question here, and then looks like we'll try to cover more questions as many we can. So I know Vishwas, you work as a CTO, and we're not going to go too much into because we have so many more questions. But one question I have and also audience have is multi-cloud, right? Using multiple clouds. So you want to spend a couple of minutes on what multi-cloud is? As your company is involved in multi for different clients, and why it's important to learn even know about multi-cloud.
Right. So I think multi-cloud is becoming more and more of a reality, right? If you, I wish I had a picture that I could show you, or I'll send a tweet out later with that picture. So you might be a large corporation, and because of some acquisitions that you made, or different business units had a certain use case that was better served by one cloud versus another, you end up in a multi-cloud. So there's some number, like a high number of companies are today in a multi-cloud for one reason or another, right? And what do we
The number
mean
is
by
60 plus percent. Yeah.
60 plus percent? And the thing to be careful about is when we talk multi-cloud, we have to be a little bit more specific. If you are if you have Salesforce and Azure, to me, that's not a definition of multi-cloud, right? Uh, the definition of multi-cloud is that the same sort of a computational workload is being deployed to more than one cloud providers, right? That's when you're multi-cloud, because otherwise, if we have this definition of you have a SaaS service, which could be running in any cloud, and then you have something else running in PaaS, by definition, you're multi-cloud. And I bet you that number would be 90 plus percent. So when I'm talking on multi-cloud is you're trying to deploy similar kinds of workloads across more than one cloud provider. So that's the definition of multi-cloud. Uh, of course, what's happening lately is we are seeing the advent of things like Azure Arc, uh, Amazon Outpost, Google Anthos, which allows you a distributed cloud capability so that you can have one control plane that is managing resources across more than one cloud. The final thing I'll say, of course, this is a big topic. We could just spend the entire talk on multi cloud, because then the next question would be, should I be in multi cloud? I'm really good in one cloud. Should I be doing multi cloud? What are the cost implications of doing that? Because you have to have a maturity in the cloud, right? If you're trying to deploy these applications, you have to have the automation maturity. You should have to have the governance maturity. Can you achieve the maturity in all of the clouds? And there was a chart from Gartner which said, as your as you increase your footprint across the cloud, your costs are going to rise as well. So that's other aspect. But the final point I will say is multi-cloud is a reality, and as we are designing applications, if we think of them as cloud native applications, think of them as containerized Kubernetes applications, which give our customers an ability to move across the cloud. That bodes well for a multi-cloud distribution.
Yep. So yeah, check out the search cloud native. If you search even CSharpCorner or Google, there's a
Yeah.
big article on what cloud native is. And I know you and bunch of our RDs and MVPs always talk about cloud native. So cloud native is something. If you're building a cloud-focused application and it's a new application, cloud native is something you want to look for. Agree with that. So Simon, let's start taking some of the questions. Some we will skip. I mean, this question says, what are the optimizing strategies in the cloud? I don't think it's a simple answer, but go ahead, Vishwas.
What are the optimization strategies? So thank you for the question, first of all, and thank you for listening. Optimization strategies can be multifold, right? And let's just take one aspect because we don't have time to cover all of them. Let's talk about cost optimization, for example. And Mahesh was talking about this earlier. The company that approached you, Mahesh. I think that the cost maturity comes with your cloud maturity, which means you look at the workload and you say, are they right sized? We have a tendency to over provision. Are they right size? Would it make sense for this application? Do I need to buy reserved instances, which means a long-term commitment? I can get these discounts. Do I have the automation that is needed to scale up and down when I need to? I'm only using the capacity that is needed. So all of that. is important as part of cloud optimization.
No, that's great. Simon, let's take more questions. So before going to cloud, what are the essential things to consider by users? I guess customers or users. So I would say
So I think Arjun, that's a good question. So I'm just trying to relate your question to your point is, hey, before you jump into the cloud, there are few things that you need to do, and I completely agree with that, right? You should not be going to the cloud for savings, as Mahesh's customer found out, right? I mean, that's not the reason. You have to think deeply about why you're trying to go to the cloud. What are the kinds of outcomes you need? You need to have a long-term roadmap. Cloud is changing rapidly. If you look at just in the last 12 months, Microsoft Azure team had over 3,000 new releases in terms of new versions and new features and capabilities. So if you don't have a good governance model, if you don't have a good brokerage model, which tells you where to deploy things, if you don't have a good center of excellence planned around the cloud that is keeping up, if you don't have executive buy-in, then just going to a cloud computing platform is not going to give you the desired results. And I hope that answers your question, Arjun.
yeah, and you definitely need somebody expert in your team who knows how to do all those things.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is a good question. How I think we were talking about this a little bit. How long does it take to become proficient in with cloud services?
Yeah. So Chaman, the cloud services is a loaded word in the Azure community, right? There's a service called Azure Cloud Service, and I'm sure you're
I
not
think he
talking.
really, yeah, he meant the whole cloud.
You mean the whole thing, right? So the way I would answer the question is, if there are 3,000 releases coming out every year, you cannot become proficient in all of them. No way you're going to get proficient, right? So what I think is the way to get proficient is, there are some core fundamentals of the cloud that you need to understand, right? That are orthogonal to all the new capabilities that are coming in, right? For example, you need to understand uh, what software-based networking is all about, right? If you want to create a network, if you want to create network segmentation, if you're a developer, you need to understand the core concept of software-defined networks. You need to understand the core concepts of software-defined storage. Uh, what is a blob storage? Uh, you have to understand the key concepts of what differentiates a PaaS and how do you do monitoring in the cloud. So I would say there are core components of the cloud uh, that you need to understand and become proficient in. So that's one way, getting the fundamentals right. And once you have that, depending on the project that you're working on, your current project may be Azure Functions and Cosmos DB. Dive deep into those two, but have your fundamentals needed. And Chavan, I'll take an example, right? So your current project is Azure Functions talking to Cosmos DB. And you will be wondering, why am I talking about networking here, right? The reason I'm talking about networking here is, if you're working for that application for a bank, they may be concerned about how the data flows from the Azure function to Cosmos DB. And you need to understand the notion of Azure Private Link that is under the covers, that ensures that your packets only flow through your network and not never navigate the internet, right? So fundamentals are important. I used to teach, Mahesh, I used to teach a 3-day class on, I would take those 50 fundamental concepts and just 8-9 hours each day to go over those fundamentals, like software defined networking, basics of a VM. And once you do that, then you can jump into the technologies that are relevant to the project that you're working on.
Yeah, I agree. And when our goal is to keep doing it, right? You just can't say, let me first become expert and then I'll do the work.
That's
I
right.
think if you try to jump in get in a real project, start working, whatever you work on those, just start learning those and get into the basics. All right, so here's another question. Can you please highlight career path for a fresher in cloud infra domain? So,
Yeah. First of all, Tarun, I commend you for asking this question. I don't see too many new entrants they all want to write Angular or Python scripts. So I commend that question, first of all, because I'll tell you, there's so much work that can be done in the cloud infrastructure area, right? I like to joke that Azure data center or the Amazon data center is just to us developers, it is just an object model. What do I mean? I can make an API call and get a router. I can make an API call and get an IP address, right? What better as a developer than to think of infrastructure as code and think of the data center as an object model? So what I would do if I were you is try to understand how the cloud uh, works, look at some of the talks that Mark Russinovich has given about insides of a data center. Start there, build up your knowledge, learn automation scripts, whether you want to learn Terraform or ARM templates or PowerShell or what have you, learn that. Start doing these projects. There are some really interesting projects out there that you can accomplish if you finish those 50 projects. One of them is how do I secure this 3-tier setup from a cloud infrastructure perspective? How do I make this PCI compliant? There are like list of projects out there. You can start working on them, look at the code, deploy that yourself, play with it, and that would be a good way to learn it. Mahesh,
Yeah.
am I taking too much time to answer these questions? I know you have more
No,
questions.
you're good. You're good. No, we want to make sure that the questions are answered, right? So people can even go watch later. But as you said, security alone, like compliance alone, are big field. If you are really good in security, there is a job already there for you. Cloud security architects and cloud security developers are there's not enough. Yep. So let's take more. Yep. Come on. Yeah. Is blockchain is going to affect the cloud?
Mahesh, we had this discussion 3 or 4 years ago that I was talking to our India team as well, and I was saying how many people are interested in learning PowerShell. There were very few people because hey, I would rather learn Angular and all of that. But the people who took the time to learn PowerShell at that time uh, have unending stream of work because there's so much of the cloud success is incumbent on automation, right?
Yep.
So go ahead.
And this trend is growing, right? There's more automation happening in the cloud than building, as Simon posted here, that AI is doing great in Power Platform, right? So Power Platform alone is being used to build so many new applications.
Yeah.
All right. So there's another question from Vishnu: is blockchain is going to affect clouds?
So Vishnu, it is already affecting the clouds. If you look at it's sort of mixed. There are all the cloud providers are offering a blockchain service at this point. You can see. In fact, those are reflecting in services. So there's a service in Azure Storage which is uh, basically guaranteed to be tamper-proof, and the underpinning of that is a blockchain model. So I think it is already affecting it either directly as a service or the implications of that on other services.
Yeah, and I think it's even Azure Ledger is now offering the same thing, right?
That's right.
Azure Ledger.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So good questions, great questions, guys. I'm impressed with the questions we're getting here. All right, Aditi asked that are any of these cloud service easier to learn than others? That's a good question.
It really depends on what you want to do. Things that you enjoy doing seem easier, isn't it? Right. But I think it's a valid question, Aditi. What I would do is, we are moving towards a model of, and Mahesh, I'm going to take a step back to answer this question,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So what we are seeing is, I've been talking a lot about network and infrastructure and things like that, and those are hard concepts to understand, important but hard, right? But not everybody has to worry about network segmentation and private link and all of that, right? If you're looking to get started quickly, if you look at the whole abstraction layer of the cloud, right? If you look at the whole term Microsoft Cloud, it is not just Azure, right? Microsoft Cloud is comprised of 3 clouds. It is Azure, it is M365, and it's the Power Platform, right? And Power Platform is the no code, low code platform. So if you're coming to the mix without having uh, uh, a programming, a professional software developer programming background, and you wanted to get started quickly, one way of doing that would be to dip your toes in something like a no code, low code model, which you can learn in a matter of days or weeks, and then combine that. So let's say you wanted to build an application, somebody called you to build an application. You can take, rather than having to know all the intricacies of SQL Server and all of that, you could build a very simple Canvas application and store the data in something called the Dataverse, which is, all of the business entities are there. You can drop your own custom entities. So that may be a good model. But if you wanted to go one step further, the logic that you want to write cannot be fully incorporated inside, let's say, a low code programming model. In that case, what you can do is maybe you can write a few lines of Python code, drop it in Azure Functions, and combine it and call it from Canvas applications. So I'm glad you asked this question, Aditi, because there are ways to get started quickly and uh, and start to add value for your customers or your employers. Uh, and then peel the layers of complexity as you have time and as you have interest.
That's great. Definitely good question. We have a couple of minutes left. Let's take another question. Sonam says, how is useful cloud for AI, or how AI is related to cloud? I'll combine those all together.
Yeah. So Sonam, good question. The way I would say is cloud has really the cheap computing capability. So if you think about it, what is making AI successful? Okay, and we should maybe talk about AI in a separate discussion, right? AI for developers should be another topic. Mahesh, maybe you can invite somebody to talk about it, right? Not AI from a data science perspective, but AI for developers. Okay, so if you look at what is creating so much interest in AI, two things: computational availability of computational capability and availability of data, right? And if you think about it, both of these things are powered by the cloud, right? You're spinning up these applications which are generating the data exhaust, which is going into the training of the models, and you have cheap capabilities in terms of computation to train your models. So the confluence of computational capabilities and data is what is leading to cloud being a useful thing for AI.
Yeah. And being there and everything is there, it's easy to set up, easy to start everything. That's why it's, yeah. There's one more question I want to take last, and then that would be, so any certification needed to cloud, or what's the importance of certification? I will add my own question there. When you hire people, does
Yeah.
certification adds any value to you and your company?
Yeah. So we've been hiring a lot, Mahesh. We have almost hired, just in the US here, we have hired more than 100 people in the last 90 days or something like that. So we've hired a lot of people. Uh, your other question about certifications, I think certifications are important. I personally think that certifications are important, but it really depends on what you do with while you're preparing for those certifications, right? If all you're doing is just, if your goal is to just do enough to be able to clear the certification exam, that is not going to take you too far, right? So having a certification looks good, but as you're preparing for the certification exam, it is really important for you to broaden your skills. Uh, what you take out of the preparation for a certification exam is up to you. And if you do that, then certification becomes really valuable. But I like the idea of somebody having, and as someone who has helped prepare some of those certification exams or served as a reviewer of these exams, I think that a lot of work goes into including the product team saying these 20 topics are important. If somebody learns these topics, they will be valuable to their teams. So if somebody has done hours of that work, you can benefit by that targeted blueprint of learning, but then don't limit yourself to exams. Think broadly as you prepare for these.
Well, great. That's great. That's great. And then last question before we close down this is what is the future of cloud?
What is the future of the cloud? I wish I knew the answer, but I will give you my 2 cents. What is happening is now that we started out with infrastructure service, of course. We went into PaaS, right? Then we obviously SaaS has been around for a long time. But if you watch the Build conference just 2 or 3 months ago, Microsoft announced two different flavors of the cloud. And for those who didn't follow the Build announcements, one is called the Microsoft Cloud for Health, uh, and the other one is the Microsoft Cloud for Retail. So what we are seeing is a super specialization of cloud capabilities dedicated to certain verticals, right? So storage compute network have become commodities, right? Kubernetes clusters have become a commodity. So, everybody has a Kubernetes cluster. You can just go to anyone. So, what is the next thing in the game, which has raised the level of abstraction, which is highly targeted community cloud environments that can allow companies to realize value faster? So, that's the direction that we are headed.
And it makes sense, right? It makes sense that all retail, for example, all retail customers need same thing. So
Yeah.
why all of them have to build their own different applications? So here Microsoft say, here's already built for you. Just go figure it out, put your products out there, start selling. That makes sense to me if you ask me.
That's right. And the other thing I would say, and we are over time, so I'll be very short here. So one is this specialty clouds, this notion of specialty clouds, as you said, Mahesh, putting cross-cutting capabilities that are domain specific in the cloud. That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it, now that you have AI powered algorithms available to you, how do you make intelligent applications in the cloud, right? That's the other part, right? Don't just build applications that are declarative and in nature, but you can start to take advantage of AI ML, infuse them with AI ML to make them intelligent applications. So those are the two trends that I'm seeing emerge: uh, high productivity, low code, specialized cloud, and intelligent applications.
Well, that was great. That was great. We had fun. So many people joined. Everybody, thank you for joining. It was fun. You asked all those questions that made it very interesting, and which was very great answers. Um, this recording will be available to you to everybody on YouTube soon, maybe by tomorrow, if somebody wants to go watch it later or share. But again, which was Friday, it's noon. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming, and
Thank,
hope to see you soon.
thank you, Mahesh, for having me, and thank you for all your listeners who took the time to listen and pose questions. I wish them the very best.
Thank you all, and I will see you next Friday, 12 noon.